I was a 21-year-old college athlete with a rosary and a scapula around my neck. Had never drank, smoked, done drugs, or had sex, and yet there just weren't enough daily masses or prayers I could say that could relieve me of the weight that I felt. It was the spring semester of my third year at the University of Dallas when our women's soccer goalie, Bronwyn Sherman, shot and killed herself in the park off 114. I shared a place with 3 guys in the student apartments, and one of them was the managing editor of the University News. Just the year before, while we were studying with UD outside of Rome, Italy, a drunken classmate of ours fell from his 3rd-floor Belvedere to his death. Back in Irving, there was a 2-page spread in the school newspaper in commemoration of his life. But here now, one of my roommates was debating whether Bronwyn's passing even deserved a mention. I mean, she committed suicide, he said. And though the managing editor knew that something had to be written, he struggled with the subject himself. So I offered to address it in the opinion section, wrote in my essay that there were issues on our Catholic campus that required more than a keg of beer and trips to the chapel to resolve. That there was a lot of unspoken pain and pressure and depression, and how confession with a priest didn't always leave one with relief. And how did I know? Well, I was also a student athlete in the middle of a heaviness that semester that I just couldn't shake. Where had it come from? I had no idea at the time, but I shut down when no one was around, withdrew from 3 of my 5 classes, and walked around campus with a head down, hoping not to be seen. Though suicide never crossed my mind, much like Bronwyn, I had no idea what to do with my feelings. Thank God I had a few friends to talk to. But if I would have only known what she was going through, perhaps I could have let her know that she was not alone. Though I felt that way when it came to calling back home. Because I was an overachieving older son, golden valedictorian, and a couple of years after my proud parents sent me off to college, they shipped my troubled sister to a very different place. Escuela Caribe, a Christian boot camp in the Dominican Republic that did terribly un-Christ-like things to teenagers, much less my sister, my best friend, leaving my family devastated, and the aftermath again and again. And only a couple of years later, they sent my brother off to a boarding school in New Hampshire to the Legionnaires of Christ, an ultra-conservative order who recruited boys from the age of 12 to be groomed into priests. And though they had pursued me quite uncomfortably when I was a child, it's like my poor parents turned a blind eye towards the plight. And what happened to my brother up there was also mightily un-Christ-like, leaving our family devastated. And in that aftermath, again and again. And I was the only son, the golden one, William, definition, protector, having protected my younger siblings until the day I left home, left struggling with the fact that my family was under attack, and ain't no hell like being helpless when a sibling fights for bail or waits from home in places where our parents thought they'd find more Jesus than the devil. Ain't no hell like being helpless while a sibling fights for bail, away from home, in places where our parents thought they'd find more Jesus than the devil. And how would I know? Because more often than not, I too was emotionally left alone in the dark, but no one ever noticed. Because I grew up to be a 21-year-old college athlete with a rosary and a scapula around my neck. Had never drank, smoked, done drugs, or had sex, and yet there just wasn't enough daily masses or prayers I could say that would relieve me of the weight that I felt. For I mastered the 10 Commandments, honored my mother and father in everything that was taught to me, and yet it was the religious order they entrusted to our family to that carried out the most devious blasphemy. and my parents couldn't face it. I now understand, Lord have mercy, none of us in my family could face it, and neither could healthier priests who would continually refer to me to therapy, because at the time, I didn't know who to forgive, much less how to forgive. And for the longest time, I didn't believe anyone could help. But this is not one of those stories that stays in the dark. For when the darkness is heaviest, there is most often a spark. And my Spanish professor, Rosenstiel, saw one in me. That same semester, I had dropped out of 3 or 5 classes. I kept her Spanish 1 elementary, and she suggested I sign up for summer immersion in Heredia, Costa Rica. Que Dios me bendiga, gave me an opportunity to explore and discover my mother's tongue for me. And my ancestors awoke with the music and the dancing, the salsa and sabor. Yes, my mother's tongue. The first thing to go when she arrived from Hato Rey, Puerto Rico, and met my father at 20. Innocence, got married in the Caribbean, and planted roots in his Northeast Louisiana hometown. And while I grew up playing basketball in his footsteps, she had me engaged as much as she could in the arts. And while he drilled strategic competition into my mind, she cultivated a life of humility and a service in my heart. You see, my father's dreams for me were somewhere around being the next Pistol Pete, a Republican candidate, and a Catholic priest. While my mother's desires were always for me to travel the world, be cultured, apolitical, and to raise a family in peace. So after reading The Alchemist in Costa Rica and graduating from UD, I took off for a 500-mile walk across northwestern Spain, the Camino de Santiago, the Way of St. James, and I began to write and to speak. Saw the light, very much more Christ-like, and encountered the Most High without getting high. Though I had my first beer at 23. And I came back to Dallas performing spoken word poetry in Deep Ellum, in Sankofa off Martin Luther King, intent to face the dark with my heart and reflect light when I could. Started an artist night out, and then Diverse Lounge was near. Creating sacred spaces for young and old alike to gather, offer an ear or a shoulder to express, to release the weight off their chest and their brains, and to offer them help to feel sane again, and for the first time, like me. Embracing each and every participant, whether on the microphone or like you in their seats. Developing a culture of listening, a sort of creative spiritual retreat with no religious elitism, political propaganda, or forced competition to get in the way, impacting culture, celebrating joy, processing through pain, collectively, as a whole, where nobody was alone, no matter background, creed, or race, never forgetting the day when I was a 21-year-old college athlete with a rosary and a scapular around my neck. Never forgetting that weight, or the day when I found out Brahman had taken her life away. But remembering every single decision I made to process through the difficulties I faced. Then, now, and through every devastating place along the way, and how I recovered my faith. Perhaps for the very first time, and how the sunlight slowly started to rise, and how I began trusting the mother of my children to make her my wife, and how our Sienna and Santiago are growing happy, joyous, and free, and how today I have forgiven my family. My parents and I are in an incredible place. And tonight, I forgive the legionaries of Christ. and their founder. For I have channeled those difficult times into my work with the youth. And I forever push the envelope in pursuit of the truth and healing and helping folks who are dealing with their own broken realities too. But we are human. This is what we do. And it is with much grace and mercy that I offer my gratitude to Nicole Stewart, my fellow cast members, and you, and my wife, for staying with me through all the anxiety and insecurity of these writing weeks. And for allowing us to face our fears and release. I pushed the envelope for so many. Thank you again, Nicole, for encouraging me to stamp the envelope you kept pushing back to me. I pushed the envelope for so many. Oral fixation, I now push it to you to be free.